To start, let's look at the foundational identity of conversation analysis or CA. For the definition, CA begins with the idea that conversation is the prototypical form of language. That means it's the metric where we all first learn how to talk. Next, let's move to the origin. Its roots are sociological. It was developed by ethnomethodologists like Garfinkel and Sachs. Their main interest was social structures, not just grammar. For the goal, the core goal is to describe social interaction from the user's own perspective. That is what we call the emic perspective. To do this, they only use empirical data, that is, recordings of naturally occurring talk. Last but not least, the methodology. Their methodology is strictly inductive. They will show you from the data, analyzing specific speech actions as participants use them. This work has led to the key finding that conversation follows a predictable, systematic set of rules or an underlying architecture.
Time to dive into adjacency pairs, AP. Let's learn and understand. Adjacency pairs, defined by Shegloff and Sachs in 1973. It is a sequence of two utterances which are adjacent and produced by different speakers. Its structure consists of first part and second part. More detailed example. The first one, when you give a greeting, you will get a greeting reply. Example, the first pair will say hello and the second pair will say hello too. This is the example of a pair that adjacent to each other and direct. Features of AP, defined by Shegloff and Sachs, 1973. The first one, two utterances length. The second, adjacent positioning of component utterances. The third, different speakers producing each utterance. The fourth, relative ordering parts. The first pair will go first and will followed by second pair. They will never backwards. The fifth, discrimination relation. It is about the first pair needs to become relevant to the second pair and completing each other. Next, Levinson states that the rule in adjacency pairs will not always be direct and linear. It can be different in real conversation. Stated here that the rule is not always followed to the letter in conversation. Frequently, insertion sequences occur. By mean, it is about the pair, the first pair and the second pair can embedded within another. Now, let's see this example. The child as the first pair asks, "Mom, can I play Nintendo now?" And Mom as the second pair. Instead of replying with a direct answer, she replied with question. And after that, the child replied to her question, "No." And after that, the mom replied the first question from his son, which is the answer is no. So this is about nasty adjacency pair. In adjacency pair, the conversation will not always be linear between the first and the second pair. They can always be layering and embedded within another. Okay, in real conversation, aside from the nested adjacency pair, there are other ways to answer or you can expect to get this answer. The first one, rewrotes. This will be applied if the person is not in place or don't have any authority to give the right answer. He or she will pass the answer to someone else with the real authority. And the second one, when you ask question, you can always expect to get a refusals. For the child, he want to play Nintendo and the mom can reply, "No, just do something else." And the last one, challenges. The mom can just reply, "You have got to be kidding me." Means that she is questioning her child intention. So you can always expect to get all this type of answer.
Now, let's move into the next part, which is conditional relevance. According to the principle of conditional relevance, cited by Shegloff 1972, one utterance provides for the relevance of a following type of utterance by setting up an expectation of what is likely to follow. If the expected type of utterance does not occur, then it is an event and is deemed to be officially or notably absent. So, conditional relevance is when someone says something, they usually create an expectation for what the next speaker should say. This is called conditional relevance, which is the first utterance condition is what the next relevant utterance should be. Basically, when two people talk, certain kinds of sentences naturally create an expectation for what should come next. For example, if someone asks, "How are you?" we expect an answer. Then, if someone says, "Do you want a drink?" we expect a yes or no. So, this expectation is what we call a conditional relevance situation. And if the expected reply doesn't come, it becomes noticeable, sometimes even a bit awkward because it becomes irrelevant. So, in this slide, we can see what happens when the second pair part, which is SPP, or the expected reply doesn't appear. For example, from the dialogue below, if someone says, "Let's hang out later," and the other person stays silent or suddenly change the topic, the conversation becomes awkward and tense. That moment of missing response actually show how strong these conversational expectations are. And then, it is also important to see the difference between this and syntax rules. Syntax is strict, and it also follows a fixed pattern like subject, verb, and object. But adjacency pairs don't work like a grammar rule. They are not fixed, but when we break the expected response, that is when we see the relevance.
Assalamualaikum and good day everyone. To begin my part, let's take a closer look at preference organization. Some adjacency pairs have only one main type of second pair part, which is SPP, and this is known as a preferred response. A clear example is greetings. When someone says hi, the expected response is simply another greeting like hi there or hello. The wording may change, but the response type stays the same. A greeting always prefer a greeting. Next, let's look at this preferred response. Most adjacency pairs allow more than one possible type of SPP. For example, when someone receives an invitation, they can either accept or refuse, but these two responses are not equal in value. Acceptance is the preferred option, while refusal is less expected and therefore dispreferred because they are not symmetrical alternative, as explained by Shelgoff and cited in Shelgoff. Now, let's look at what preference organization actually means. In conversation analysis, preference does not refer to someone's personal feelings or psychological choices. Instead, it is a structural feature of thought. This means the organization of conversation is built in a way that makes certain responses easier, smoother, and more expected. Because of this structure, preferred responses are usually simpler. They are direct, quick, and require very little additional explanation. For example, saying yes to an invitation or replying hi to a greeting fits naturally into the flow of interaction. These smooth and straightforward responses show how preference organization helps conversation move forward efficiently. Now, moving on to these preferred responses. Unlike preferred responses, these preferred ones often come with more complexity. They may include delays, hesitations, softening phrases, or explanation before the real answer is given. For example, before refusing an invitation, a speaker might pause or give a reason showing that the response doesn't fit smoothly into the conversation. Because of this, preference is not just about what people like to say, but about how certain actions are structured in thought. In other words, preference is something that is performed through the organization of conversation. The way people shape their responses, simple or complex, shows how preference is built into the very structures of interaction. Let's look at an example of a preferred response. Here, Amy gives an invitation by saying, "Would you like to come over tomorrow night?" Jane immediately replies, "Yeah, that's be nice." This is a straightforward acceptance, which fits perfectly with how preference organization works. There is no delay, no hesitation, and no extra explanation. Jane responds immediately, showing that the acceptance aligns smoothly with the structure of conversation. She also doesn't justify or explain her answer because preferred responses are naturally simple, direct, and easy to deliver. This example clearly demonstrates how a preferred response supports the flow of interaction. Finally, let's look at an example of a dispreferred response. Here, Harry invites Joy by asking, "Would you like to get together on Wednesday?" Joy doesn't respond immediately. Instead, he hesitates, saying, "Well, I don't really know. It's a bit hectic for me Wednesday, you know." This is dispreferred SPP, a decline. We can notice the delaying tactics such as pauses and hesitation. In fact, there is no direct rejection. Moreover, declining can be seen as rude. So, extra conversational work is needed to soften the response. These preferred responses are naturally more complex, requiring speakers to manage the interaction carefully to maintain politeness and smoothness.
Next, let's go through on this preferred response in another context. These preferred responses can be seen as rude or hostile, so extra conversational work is required in their performance. Let's see the first example that we got from Shiglov 2007. From the example, we can see that A asking, "Is it near Edinburgh?" and B answered, "It's not too far." Instead of directly saying, "No, it's not near," B give a gentle response. We can see that B avoids direct contradiction, which means a softened disagreement. From the example, we can see that it shows how these preferred responses are shaped to protect social harmony. Let's move to the second example we got from cited in Shiglov 2007. So the example says that A asking, "How about friends? Have you friends?" and B answered, "I have friends, so-called friends. Let me put it that way." We can see that B begins with an apparent agreement, that is, "I have friends." then slowly shifts to disagreement with hedges and qualifications. This step-by-step correction reduces the harshness of outright agreement. It shows how speakers hide their disagreement to sound polite. Next, let's talk about preference for contiguity. So, what is contiguity? In conversations, the first pair part are known as FPP and second pair part, known as SPP, should appear right next to each other. This is the preferred conversational pattern. When contiguity is broken, these preferred responses usually do not come immediately. They often include silence or pause, or can be daily markers like or hedges like I don't know, and also could be icons or excuses such as reason given before answering. These elements signal that the speaker is giving a dispreferred response. Let's see the example that we got from Shiglov 2007. So from the example, we can see that A asking, "You coming down early?" and B answered, "Well, I got a lot of things to do before getting cleared up tomorrow. I don't know, I probably won't be too early." B delays the answer with well, then give excuses that is accounts before the actual response. And afterwards, B use hedges like I don't know. This breaks contiguity and signals that the response is not preferred.